Welcome to the Women Inspire Aspire podcast. In this episode, I talk to Meera Venkatesan about educational storytelling.
Hi, Mira. Thanks for accepting my invite to appear in the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, Venkat. Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting for me.
Okay, is this the first time you are appearing in a podcast?
Yes, I should say that yes, that is true.
Okay, tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do? Where do you live, etc.?
Thank you, Venkat. So, yeah, I live in Bangalore and pretty much have been in Bangalore most of my life except for a short stint outside. So, just so happened that I've become a Bengaluru girl. I work as a chief learning officer with a non-profit called Anahata United Efforts, and we are into career education for government school high schoolers across the state of Karnataka. So we have like a 3-year program, and yeah, I work with Anahata United Efforts as the heading learning and spearheading the curriculum and all that. That said, I'm also a very, very interested storyteller, and that has always been something that has been very close to me. Happiness and real mojo to be with children and share with them. I have been doing storytelling for quite a long time now. So, pretty much, I would say these are like the twin heads that I'm trying to move forward with my life in.
Okay, they say that it's pretty difficult to move with twin heads, but I don't know how you are managing. Um, okay, so you work as the chief learning officer, you said. What are your roles and responsibilities exactly? Is it something to do with designing the curriculum? What are the challenges involved in designing the curriculum for the domain that you specified, which is the government schools, correct?
Correct, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I do. Well, if can I just get into my background a bit? Is that okay? So I would like to share like how I came here,
Absolutely.
and with that I can answer that question. Yeah. So yeah, I think like most people of my generation, who it was like a given that if you get decent marks in your 12th, then you go for a professional degree, which is in engineering or medicine or a CA. So either one of the three was sort of given we were given options. So yeah, I ended up doing engineering, industrial engineering, in fact. And it was not that I had, I actively did not like it or anything, but yeah, it was something where I did feel that it was not my space yet. So I did work in that field for some time, and then I took a career break. And when I came back, I came to know about this wonderful field called instructional design, which was something very fascinating for me because all along I had wanted to get into teaching, but being a teacher was not something I was prepared for just because of the amount and volume of patience and care you would need, through the day, the energy. So then I came to know also that there's a whole science here. We are talking about taking away the onus from the learner to someone who is teaching or the creation of the curriculum. So then I decided to do a reinvent and started from ground zero, which was something very interesting for me. And I worked with couple of corporates as a learning designer. And then the storytelling bug caught me. And then I started working with children. But of course, my background as a learning designer was something that really helped me in creating that kind of curriculum which children would relate to, because I was not working in a school, I was working of outside school activity centers. So then, you don't take discipline for granted there. You don't say that I have a class and I do classroom management and everyone comes and sits and, it's all good and there are rules. It's not there. It's just not there. You create an environment where the student needs to be interested, the children need to be interested in what you're telling. That was a big again a big turning point in my life, and coupled with this learning design, storytelling, and I found stories are like just an amazing way to reach to children. in every possible sense of the word. It's not just the story itself, it is the drama of it. Like, I could clearly see that, just like I did with my children, as I'm working with the children, a little bit of drama goes a long way. It's that emoting, it's that expressions, the way you connect to them. That was something that really fascinated me. And so, this role, something that is very, very close to my heart and something that I cherish. Because here I am, my team rather, is getting to create a very experiential and interactive curriculum for government school kids who at that point, unlike many of the private schools, the level of exposure is quite low, but they have the fire within them to reach just like anyone else. So while academic curriculum is great, making them better in math and science, many of them don't know why they're studying. I won't say it's very different with the private school kids, but yeah, they don't know why they're studying. And so it's easier for them to just drop out of the system. So it was quite challenging, in fact, to devise and design something that would actually keep them interested. To hear from the children that this made me realize that I really need to finish this studies. I need to finish my studies, and that's going to help me in this way. This is what I want to do. That from children, I think it's an amazing feeling.
Right. Let's move on and talk about the challenges that you are having in designing the curriculum. As I said, when you are working with specific domain or a specific space like a government school, you might hit some roadblocks or you might have some challenges in this process. So would you be able to share some of these challenges and give us some insights?
Some of the challenges, I wouldn't call them challenges. I would call it putting in the effort to understand the audience. There are multiple things which are different from a slightly or sometimes to a varying degree. The learning levels, the language levels, their ability to read sometimes is also a challenge in any language. And the government school system is, and rightfully so, built such that it should not let any child who wants to attend school out of the system. So every child is allowed to go up the school ladder literally, irrespective of their abilities, irrespective of where they are with respect to learning. And secondly, many of these children do carry a baggage, emotional baggage, and they have not fully processed it. So, they do have a lot of issues, which the government school system is, I'm not saying it's not trying to solve, it is trying to solve, but it is a humongous issue. So there will be, behavioral issues with these children. So so unless there is something that is convincing to them, unless they are convinced that this is something that is going to make my life or change my life, they're not going to apply themselves to it. I would say also they're used to a very specific type of education, which is pretty much rote learning. Though, there are a lot of schemes, even in government schools, especially in government schools, that are actually on paper, there are some very beautiful schemes which are about experiential learning. Like they have No Bag Day, they have Talent Day, they have everything. But at the end of it, for the system itself, it is just a huge task to make sure that these children are able to complete the program and they do not drop out. So while, designing for these children, as I said, I think the primary thing which we look at is to you have to make them come to the water literally. You have to make the horse come to the water. We can go there and talk to them, but unless you make it so that it is something which convinces them, which makes them feel that yes, there is something in this for me, let me try it out, it will be very difficult to reach else anywhere, especially because we don't have like a report card assessment, not that kind of an exam. So there's no fear of failure, there's no fear of studies. So that, I would say, is something that we need to work to understand our audience. That said, they do have many of them have a tremendous fire in their belly to overcome the situations they are in and move forward socially and economically. And that is something that I would say compensates for any challenge we face with the children.
Right. And isn't it true that we all have this blockage in us that when we don't see the benefits of applying something, we don't usually do it? Even all of us. It's pretty interesting that they have a specific set of restrictions that they have in their mind towards going towards better learning and better process of learning. So interesting. So thanks for sharing that. And let's talk about your storytelling. So you said that you are doing the storytelling for the children. What are your experiences so far? Can you share some interesting anecdotes?
That's something very, very close to my heart. So, started around 14 years back now when I did a course with Mrs. Geeta Ramanujam Katalia. Just like any other mother, I knew that stories are going to take me a long way because you can't work with children with logic as much. So it's the stories that help me make motherhood literally possible. But I never thought that, this was something that I would be good at professionally. That seemed the remotest idea in my mind. It's just that, you spin stories so that you get your job done. Then when I came across this, and then it started off working with children, there is a different quality of storytelling to children. While I do both for children and adults, I do programs for adults and I tremendous enjoy them because I like writing, I like scripting, I would say performances, and I like doing some creative things. With children, there is a certain boundary that you don't push beyond in terms of language, devising different methods. So definitely their adults are a good audience, but with children, their energy, it's just infectious. I can't find any better word. So when you're telling stories to children, you really don't know whether you are giving them energy or they are giving you energy. And so it's like literally you just pick the energy off them and they pick it off you. It's a very, very, very interactive space, right? So, and in that space, I have often found that there are ways where when you talk about things which are otherwise you would find it difficult to speak or maybe difficult to listen more, this space which creates it's like a bond, it's like a thread between you and the children you're telling the stories to. It's like you're connected. You're so connected that it is so much possible to pass on logic and facts and sometimes emotions and thoughts, to seed thoughts. And that is something that me and my colleagues have done many times. Some of the interesting things that I have done with storytelling, I devised a English language teaching curriculum using stories for first, second, and third graders. So that was very interesting. That was for another non-profit which was working for them. And we found that while our textbooks are full of stories, they're not told as stories most of the time. They're told as lessons. So the key difference is that you jump into it. I don't know where I read this. This is something that has really stayed with me. As a storyteller, let us say you're talking of something across the river. You don't just show the situation. You don't just show the setting across the river. You go across the river. You go across the river. You go into the forest. You are there along with your listener. Whereas in theater, you are there at a stage and the listener is there at the other end. They are your audience. But in a story, as a storyteller, just go there along with them. And as you are there, it is so much more easier to connect to them and give them that information or logic. Then we did during COVID, we did around 2 years, we did stories across different domains like STEM, history. So we used to have weekly sessions. So we had a set of 10 topics over 2 months, and then we would again jump back to that. So that was amazing because in a way I felt the kids were of course imprisoned in their house. They were not able to go out. But we were able to give them a window to something very, very interesting. And that is something the kids remember. These are some of my experiences, many beautiful experiences, especially with children.
I have seen that when you are dealing with children, you have to be emotive, you have to be animated, you need to engage in a lot of ways which is appealing for them. Let's move on and talk about some of your hobbies and interests apart from your work.
For now, my most predominant hobby is storytelling, I would say, because right now I'm not engaged in it as much professionally as I used to before. But other than that, traveling is something I really enjoy with my family and otherwise. Reading, I've always been an avid reader, and writing, I write whenever I fancy. So I won't even say that I'm an amateur writer, but I did have got a couple of my stories published, and it was even won an award a few years back. So yeah, I do enjoy writing. I think I need that particular mind space. So nowadays I'm more given to writing short poems, which I just take a short time to finish rather than longer pieces. I do script a lot of performances that I do with my colleagues, and that is something that gives me tremendous happiness. So writing is something that's really up my sleeve.
When it comes to writing poems, do you have any specific setting in which you write the poems? Like you want to go to Cubbon Park or something like that, where you go and write the poems, or the poems just flow anywhere you are there? How does it work?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you've asked this question, Venkat, because that is something that I have often thought about myself. Like, I have never felt the need to be in any different environment to write. And I often think about it. And in fact, a lot of what I write is already formed in my head, even before I sit down to type it or write it. So it's like they just come in my head as I'm cooking, as I'm driving, as I'm walking, or any activity. I don't know, I have often wondered, and I have tried to that. I said, whenever we go on vacations, or whenever we go out somewhere, I tell myself that, see, this is how people get inspiration, so I'm going to try to do that. Unfortunately, it has never happened. So, it's just that whenever, whatever, sometimes some things just get into my mind and I want to write, and I write. That's all.
Okay, let's talk about what are the societal issues that you have come across around you, and what bothers you, or what frustrates you, or what triggers you so much that you want to talk about it, you want to rant about it, or you want to apply a solution.
Yes. Actually, I have had quite a few recent experiences with customer service. One such was actually someone close to me was hospitalized, where she was undergoing treatment, and I was with her as the primary caregiver, and it was a process which was supposed to take 4 hours. Just so happened that within 1.5 hours it was over, and we were told that it is something that could cause reactions. So I was definitely very agitated. And then I went and asked the doctor. The doctor came, they did some checks and all. They said, looks okay, but if there is any issue, please let us know immediately. We don't know how it happened. And so it was definitely a goof up. Fortunately, nothing happened. She was fine. Even as we were still in that stress of what could have happened, is what is going on in our mind. There's this team that comes in. This is one of the bigger hospitals in Bangalore, very well attired, and they come in with 2 nurses and all. And they looked at me. I asked them, yes, what is it? They said, we are from the customer excellence team, ma'am. I said, oh, that's wonderful. We wanted to check if everything is all right. So I told them, no, it's not all right. We've just gone through this, and evidently there has been an issue. Something must have gone wrong. So I don't know why that happened. So we are really very stressed. Then the person says, I'm very sorry to hear that. And my apologies. I said, okay. And then within the same breath, he says, this is some patient experience week, and so we want to give you, the patient, a gift. I looked at him and was like, what exactly are you trying to say? I'm just saying that I'm under deep stress. Then he said, it's just a gift. I said, okay, give it. And they gave something in the box, which apparently turned out to be a coffee mug. Then I said, okay, give it and go. I said, can we take a photograph? Then I lost my cool. I said, like, what are you trying to do? You say you're from the patient experience excellence team or something like that, and I'm just telling you the patient is completely stressed because of something wrong that happened, while your language was all correct, your body language was all correct. What you wanted to do was take photographs. So then this really set me thinking, and after that I've had 2-3 experiences on similar lines, most recently with a phone, while clearly the person who was on the other end, evidently inexperienced, who has been given a script, and they are talking a script. It's like the script that we write as playwrights. The only tough part is they cannot go beyond that script. This person has been asked to come and take a photograph. So he will take a photograph and go. So I was, it's really started getting me, thinking, where are we going with this customer service, right? So we have all the right language, like, when we teach kids, we say magic words, please, thank you, sorry. Yes, our customer service team is now able to use all the magic words in the right way, but the problem is that they are not able to go beyond the words at all. Going overboard, and we are going on high gear to say that we want to humanize AI. and to an extent that the AI can behave like a human being to us. On the other hand, we are robotizing humans, and we are telling them that for efficiency, all that you need is to handle this customer, and that customer, it is, I will tell her she's being recorded, we'll tell her that escalation and all that will happen. Nothing will happen, and they will just be given, they'll talk a script and they will finish it. There is no concern, there is no empathy, there is nothing that agenda at all of going beyond themselves, customer experience, customer happiness. So this is very interesting, the thought that came to me. When we were young, we used to go to these stores where regular, normal, small stores, and you buy some, let's say, clothes, you look for some clothes, and then let's say you don't buy. The shopkeeper will shout at you. They'll say, what were you thinking? Asking me to throw everything. You're not interested. And now, of course, they will say, sure, ma'am, you don't mind. If you don't want, it's fine, ma'am. Yeah, fine. Yeah, please, ma'am. That's it. But then, which is really better? Are we somewhere better off with this customer experience thing, or is it more like facade? That is something that has been really on my mind for quite some time now.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. If you look at this problem deeply, you will realize that the problem is because the customer service team is an installed team which is different from the real doctor team in the hospital incident that you mentioned, and they have no ownership of the patient, their problems, and whatever you are facing, just because they are a different team, and they have no clue about what happened to the patient, what is the history, and they are not in touch with the doctors who are handling the patient. They suddenly come in from a different department and try to do something to make you feel better or make you happy, with no background or no empathy or no inputs on what's going on with the patient, right? So that is the real problem. Even in the other incident that you mentioned about the shopkeeper owns the shop, and so he has all the ownership in himself to shout at you when you are not buying anything. Whereas the person who is coming in as a customer service in a retail shop or something like that, they don't have ownership of the shop. They are just there to do their job. Their job is to interact with you, get some inputs, fill up some surveys, and go back. And they don't even care how the feedback comes and how we are going to implement the feedback and follow up on the feedback. All those things, they don't care. Their job is just, as you said, the scripts and delivering those scripts and try to get some inputs from you and then go back. Real problem here is ownership. So as long as the person who is doing this customer service don't have any ownership of what they are trying to do, if there is no stake for them, then absolutely this is going to repeat, because we try to outsource the customer service as a department to a different team. This is not only true for customer service, it's happening even in other areas like software development. You have so many teams. One team doesn't know what the other team is doing, and there is a lot of communication and handshake issues are happening. So I have faced these kind of issues in software development. So the only way to address that would be, I guess, the customer service team has to be more involved and engaged and buy in with what really is going on in this situation, so that they know what exactly is happening, and that will naturally bring the empathy that is required to handle the situation.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the nail. So yeah, absolutely. By creating a silo, right, which has no ownership at all on the process, and even their KRAs are very specific to their process. For example, a customer, a patient experience team KRA is not about, making sure the wellness of a patient. It's just about, making sure that the patient is given a good experience, and whatever that means. Similarly, it's about handling them. Their KRAs are all about handling. I feel the onus is really not on solving the issue. So again, a couple of times when I had to call and I had to escalate, they just told me in a very, very polite way that there is no way to escalate. We will escalate it for you. I said, let's see. I am definitely unhappy with whatever service you're providing me, and this is something that is causing me a lot of pain. I want to reach out to somebody. Is there an email ID? No. Is there a phone number? No. Is there any way for me to reach somewhere above and let them know that this is not solving my problem? No. We have raised an escalation. I said, okay.
And the funny thing is, you won't really get to speak to this person again. They will close the case and they will go away and attend something else. And there is no trajectory or there is no history of what has happened. And the same person will not come into the case again. There might be some notes. They might be reading that online, and a different person will be attending that person, you will have to explain that again, what has happened so far. If the notes are not sufficient, and most of the times the notes will not be there. So this is all because there is no continuity and ownership. So this is exactly why the issue is happening. I faced this multiple times. Thanks for sharing those thoughts with us. So it was great talking to you. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, not specifically, I think, but it's been very interesting, Venkat. And how long have you been having this podcast?
This has been going for 3 or 4 months now. It all started, one of my friends was like a backbone of finding people. I have around 7 to 8 recordings now that needs to be edited and released. I'm looking for more people. So all of your friends are welcome.
Yeah. And what made you get into this? Is this something? I mean, you said you started it 3 months back. So is it something like a newfound interest or something always on your mind?
I am an author, so I wrote my first book, and I wanted to have some friends who can talk with me about the book, and also I had another friend who wanted to talk about the arranged marriage scenario in India. So I did another podcast on that. After a while, I figured that there are a whole lot of people who don't find expression, who actually want to talk about something. It could be a generic discussion, probably starting with their career and then going into their hobbies and interests, issues that bother them, and things like that. So this is generally the pattern that I thought it would be interesting to talk about. And it has been a fantastic journey because I have found a variety of people from different fields, different set of attitudes and different personalities who came into the podcast and talked about themselves. We have had around 20 episodes so far. My objective is to get to around 50, probably have a brand around it. It's just in the nascent stages. And so we have had a very fabulous mix of people. So that has been pretty interesting. It's also a learning experience for me when I listen to all these people. I'm able to share that learning with others also. They learn something from it, and then they come back and tell me, Venkat, I really like this particular podcast. So that's really an inspiration for me. We are moving at a fast pace, planning to have more podcasts and more guests, and we have a couple of storytellers from Bengaluru also.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I must say it's been very comfortable, this conversation, and you are able to, keep that flow and give that space very nicely.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I wish you all the
Sure.
best in your career and whatever you are up to in your life.
Thank you very much. I wish you the same, and wishing this podcast every success.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
That was a great podcast with Meera Venkatesan. Please subscribe to this channel and follow it for more awesome podcasts. Opinions expressed by the guests in this podcast are their own. The host or the sponsors of the podcast do not condone the opinions expressed by the guests or the actions arising out of those opinions. Any decisions or actions that the listeners might take as a result of listening to this podcast must be based on their own judgment and will be at their own risk. The podcast host or their sponsors will not be held responsible for the consequences of any actions and or decisions taken as a result of any content in this podcast.